show up this week for our Altadena town hall, but then they reneged on their promise. KBLA Talk 1580 organized a town hall specifically for Black Altadena residents, people whose homes, memories, and futures went up in smoke when SCE's equipment sparked the flames. This wasn't some ambush or gotcha moment. This was a community saying, we need answers. We need to understand how this so-called fast pay program actually works. We need to know if justice will ever reach us. And Edison said no. Let's be crystal clear about what that means. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was a choice that tells Black Altadena residents that even after the fire, even after the devastation, even after admitting fault through the settlement program, they still don't matter enough for a couple of hours of Edison's time. You know what takes courage? Facing people you've harmed, sitting in a room and yes, live on talk radio with folks who lost everything because of your infrastructure failures and explaining how you intend to make it right. That takes backbone. That's what real accountability looks like. When you're the reason people lost everything, you don't get to cancel on survivors waiting for answers. You don't get to send your regrets to KBLA and call it a day. This is about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. This is the same pattern of neglect that may have led to the fires in the first place, and now they're doubling down on disrespect in the aftermath. The residents of Altadena have endured enough hell, and now they are navigating the nightmare of settlement claims, trying to understand what they are actually entitled to receive. Southern California Edison, you owe Black Altadena more than money. You owe them your presence, your transparency, your time, and you owe KBLA Talk 1580 a public apology, I might add. And until we get it, we're going to keep emailing the top dog at SCE, Mr. Pedro Pizarro. His email is pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Pizarro spelled P-I-Z-A-R-R-O. pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Or you can call 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1. That's 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1 to speak to a live person and express yourself. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley, and as always, we welcome your feedback.
How much a dollar really costs? The question is detrimental, paralyzing my thoughts. Parasites in my stomach keep me with a gut feeling, y'all. Gotta see how I'm chilling once I park this luxury car. Hopping out feeling big as Mutombo. 20 on pump 6, Tony Marcellus called me Dumbo. 20 years ago, came for guilt. Now I can lend him my ear or two. How to stack these residuals tenfold. The liberal concept that men do. 2006, he didn't hear me. Indigenous African, only spoke Zulu. My American tongue was lyric. Walked out the gas station, a homeless man with a 70-tan complexion. Asked me for 10 rand, stressing about dry land. Deep water, powder blue skies that crack open. A piece of crack that he wanted. I knew he was smoking, he begged and pleaded. Asked me to feed him twice, I didn't believe it. Told him beat it.
You are listening to The Black Pack. I'm your host, Adrianne Shropshire, and I am so happy to be joined in this hour by Cornell Belcher, founder and president of Brilliant Corners Research and Strategy. So Cornell, when you were on last, Andy and I were having some back and forth, I remember, about Kendrick, and I didn't let you add your Kendrick commentary in. So so there's some Kendrick for you once again. But thank you for joining.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And apparently Kendrick appreciates it too, being all the Grammys that he's nominated.
He apparently racked up not yet one, but anyway, the nominations more than anybody, I think. So we had just this past Tuesday a bunch of elections across the country, a huge jolt of energy and excitement, at least from the Democratic perspective, maybe not so much from the Republican perspective, in an off-year election. So, I often say that we talk about off-year elections. No election is actually actually off. We don't actually have off years when it comes to elections. But there was something different about this one, I think. And so I wonder, when you look at this year's so-called off-year election, right? What did you take away? Like, what surprised you from Tuesday night about what we saw?
Well, what surprised me is turnout. And look, you and I have talked about this before. And, we have a lot of pundits on television many of them who've never worked in a campaign before, but talking about politics and talking about campaigns. And for many of them, it is like, what determines the outcome of elections is, 40 or 30% of people swinging back and forth saying one election, I choose this candidate, then the next election going, oh my God, I made completely the wrong decision. I was completely wrong. I'm sorry I was so wrong. And then moving back the other way. And in reality, that's just not how people behave.
Right.
And so, we've talked about this before. Like, if you tell me what turnout is going to be like, I'm going to tell you who's going to benefit or who's going to have an advantage in that election. And what we have seen consistently is Republicans being able to turn out their infrequent voters at much higher rates. And what we've seen over the last couple of elections is really historic turnout among Republican voters. But what we saw this past off year is infrequent Democrats, and particularly infrequent voters of color, turning out at a rate that surprised me, and we need it. And look, can I get in the weeds a little bit with the audience? I know your audience loves getting in the weeds.
I'm going to ask you to hold on to your deep dive into the weeds for just a second, because I want to get, because I think that the sort of who showed up, because when we talked about this before too, particularly about 2024, we talked about who didn't show up, right? And so how did that differ, right? In this past Tuesday's election. So yes, we're gonna get into the weeds and talk about the sort of surprising victories, or maybe they shouldn't have been surprises, given, I think where you're headed in this conversation. But when we come forward, more with Cornell Belcher. This is the Black Pack on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
Find what you love what you find. A Total Wine and More. There's so much waiting for you. Spirits and beer, thousands of wines. Guides in the know, and prices so low, it just might blow your mind. You're gonna find what you love and love what you find.
With curbside pickup and delivery available, you'll always find what you love, only at Total Wine and More.
Drink responsibly, B21.
Small businesses are the heart of America. But you don't have to go it alone. As the nation's largest nonprofit resource of expert business mentoring, SCORE has helped millions of entrepreneurs build their businesses for free. Get the connections, education, and guidance you need with SCORE. We're ready to help. Find a mentor today at score.org.
You're still glowing, flirting, grooving. You still got it. But your immune system weakens as you age, making it harder to fight flu, pneumococcal pneumonia, RSV, and COVID-19. Vaccines are a key part of any health routine and help strengthen your immune response. Ask your doctor or pharmacist which vaccines you need. Schedule in minutes at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
An official message from Medicare.
Medicare plans change from one year to the next. And this year, it's important for you to review your current coverage and compare all your options during Medicare open enrollment. Compare health plans, drug coverage, and costs. See if you can save some money, and don't forget to make sure your drugs are covered. Open enrollment ends December 7th. Visit Medicare.gov or call 1-800-MEDICARE.
Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach? Transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal? Prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
We are continuing our conversation about this past Tuesday's elections with Cornell Belcher, founder and president of Brilliant Corners Research and Strategies. So Cornell, I do want to kind of dive into your perspective on what happened on Tuesday. So one of the things I want to just lift up as kind of a takeaway for me, and I know that you and I were actually texting about this on Tuesday, is that whatever the spin, right, that Trump and the Republican Party want to try and put out there, people showed up to register their opposition, right, to Trump and the Republicans and their mishandling, right, of everything from the government to the economy to healthcare, right. And one of the things that we saw, and that you said this on Tuesday night, is that Black voters are locked in, right, and so what that meant is that you had, here in California, right, you had more than 7 million Black voters, 7 million voters who showed up, and Prop 50 passed 63% to 36%, right, overwhelmingly passes, right. The exit polls are saying that Black Californians supported the measure at over 90%, right? In Virginia, you had over 90% of Black voters support the governor-elect Abigail Spanberger. In New Jersey, you have more than 90% of Black voters support Governor-elect Mikey Sherrills. In New York City, right, where the story had been after the Democratic primary that Black voters didn't support Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, right? But 57% of Black voters from Harlem to Bed-Stuy showed up and voted for Mamdani. So you have Black voters that weren't voting in the 90s. So the support levels for Democrats in 2024 were not in the 90s from Black voters. And now we're seeing sort of a return to what we've seen in major elections, even presidential elections, in terms of Black support. So one, what do you make of that, right? And what does that mean? Can we actually, project into the future about what that might mean for Black participation?
Well, it's not a return, Adrianne, because if you look over the last, you go back to elections, especially sort of presidential year elections, go back to the 90s. And what you have on average is 80, anywhere between 83 and 88% of African Americans voting for the Democratic candidate. What you have in the Obama years is a bit of a phenomenon, outlier, where you have upwards of 93, 94% of Black voters voting for Barack Obama. And as, again, full transparency, as someone who worked for Barack Obama in both those campaigns, it was a phenomenon that I didn't think we would see easily or readily again. So I am surprised by that level of African Americans being locked in, because it's not something we've seen in recent elections. And what I want to say is it's both performance but also turnout.
Right.
And so you do have African Americans running up the score in opposition to Trump and everything Trumpism. Look, and I want to push back on sort of our mainstream media, who always wants to dumb down the story and make it one-dimensional. And if you look at the headlines, I mean, I was reading one headline, I think it was in Politico, that was, Democrats have found their sort of magic, their magic sauce or in affordability, right?
Mm-hmm.
As if it was simply talking about the cost that made black and brown voters turn out at a higher rate in this off year than they had in previous off years and vote overwhelmingly for the Democratic candidate in a way that they have not done in a long, long time. I think is an oversimplification of the election results when so many, it wasn't the cost of eggs that a conversation about the cost of eggs that generated, 90+% support for black people for Abigail Spanberger or Sherrill. And look, both of them ran fantastic campaigns, but let's be clear about something. I think we are doing ourselves a disservice if we simply say the lesson is talk about affordability, because it's so much more than just affordability, especially when you look at brown votes. And look, let's go to New Jersey for a moment. We had over 3 million votes in New Jersey this time around, and typically, I was on television. I said this. Look, if I think it will turn out, will we see a little over 2 million votes in New Jersey, or will we see close to 3 million votes in New Jersey? I didn't think we'd get over 3 million, like 3.2 million votes in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so you had a tidal wave of ticked off, infrequent Democrat voters flooding the polls in opposition to Trump, and it absolutely lifted the boats of Democrats across the country, everywhere they were on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there is, I appreciate you talking about the oversimplification, because it is almost an attempt, or maybe not almost an attempt, but an attempt to say, for the voters of color who showed up, we're going to ignore why they showed up, right? We're going to ignore why they showed up, and we're just going to focus on what we think, working class white folks showed up for. Right. Because, it is so much more than just the cost. Obviously, costs are an issue. The fact that they are, seemingly intentionally tanking the economy is a reason for people to show up. But it's also all the other things. It's militarized. It's, our cities being militarized. It's, folks from Black Hawk helicopters, rappelling down onto buildings and children being snatched from, and all the things. And it's also not just in blue cities. This is the thing that I was saying earlier about this idea, Republicans sort of spinning this as just like blue people in blue states doing blue things, right? It's not true, right? Yeah. We see folks in Mississippi, right? Voters in Mississippi break the supermajority in the Mississippi state legislature. Right? Democrats break the supermajority. That's in this election that happened, right? We see folks win statewide election. Democrats win statewide elections in Georgia the first time in decades. We see, Virginia, your home state, right? That counties in Virginia all shifting toward Democrats. This is not just about some Democrats who decided that they were all going to get up and go vote. This is also about other people registering their opposition, right? Folks who supported, again, 9 counties in California voted to pass, they voted for Trump, voted to pass Prop 50. This is all kinds of people registering their opposition to this administration.
And I think, and look, you got to look no further than and again, I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit here. Look, if you go to Virginia and a voting bloc that is critical that we don't pay enough attention to, but they're a minority group, right? Mm-hmm. Look at Asian American voters, and Asian American voters broke for Spanberger by 60 points. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is almost double their support that they gave to the Democrats in the last governor's election in Virginia. Right. So there's so much more going on, especially with voters of color. Mm-hmm. than what the mainstream media wants to dumb it down and say Democrats simply talk about costs.
Right.
That, you know, all of a sudden, like a magic, everything changes. And I think it's just a oversimplification that is actually sort of insulting to our intelligence. But it also does this, Adrianne. Again, it is the sort of putting our issues and our angst on the back burner,
right,
and not giving them the same value as they give to other people.
Yeah, and I think that this is sort of like this sort of tension. I talked about this earlier with Dr. Jason Johnson about the sort of tension in the Democratic Party about, do we, and I'm going to oversimplify it again like I did earlier, this sort of like one faction in the party being like, we have to focus on the working class white voters who've been voting for, Trump for the last 3 elections, presidential election cycles. And we need to sort of push down, like not talk about the things, right, that people in our base, right, our voting base in the Democratic Party, that they want to talk about. We need to not talk about stuff. We need to not talk about racism. We need to not talk about LGBTQ issues. We need to not talk about any of that stuff. We need to just focus on this, costs and affordability issues, right? And then on the other hand, you have folks who are saying, actually, we need to lean into our base because 20 million voters didn't show up in 2024. You'll tell me if that number's right or not. Didn't show up in 2024, and we need to actually get them back in the game, right? And I think that this is a fundamental. This should not be, to be really clear, this should not be a debate that's happening inside the Democratic Party. But I think that it is, right? And what we just saw, right, in that will play out also in 2026 is that people need to run the campaigns that work for the electorate that they are running to gain their votes from, right? And so you're not going to have people saying the same thing all the time, but you also just can't dismiss what key segments of the electorate actually need to hear from you. And that's on some of these other issues that we know from our polling, from your polling, right, that voters of color in particular really need for candidates to be talking about.
I think it's amazing navel gazing by certain segments of progressives to think that we got this sort of performance by infrequent voters of color simply by talking more about cost of living. Right. And I think it's really sort of dumbfounding. We can talk about all these things. It's not an either or, right?
Right.
And every campaign is in fact different. You can't take a lesson from a northeastern corridor campaign and say this is how we're now going to do it in the rural South, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
But there is something happening in this country, in the climate of this country, where people, particularly people of color, who pull back from the electorate in past years, are waking back up and participating and giving Democrats greater performance numbers in the past. Again, let's look at New Jersey, where when you dig down deep in there, we talk about the Hispanic vote a lot over the last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
But in New Jersey, 18% of Hispanics who voted for Trump voted for Cheryl. They moved and voted for the Democratic candidate over the Republican candidate there, who put his arms around Trump and who Trump endorsed, right? So something else is going on that's much deeper than that simply a conversation about affordability doesn't explain.
Yeah. And I think there is I asked you this a little bit before, but I think there's a question about how can this be extended, right? Can this sort of energy, right, and urgency, right, that I think we saw from voters on Tuesday night, like it cannot be extended for an entire year. And some of that has to do with what Democrats and first of all, I just want to be clear that we saw this trend of voters who didn't show up and also folks voting for Democrats has been happening, right, since last year when we've had these special elections, right, and Democrats have won special elections that people didn't think that they were going to win, and that's true. That carried out on Tuesday. There's a question about can we extend it and what do Democrats need to do to extend it, and some of that also plays into what's happening right now in Congress, right? Like, do they cave and get nothing, right, out of the shutdown? Do they continue to stand and fight, right? What are the decisions that they make that are outside of the electoral arena that say to their base and say to voters, like, we understand? Like those two things are not unrelated, I think.
No, I don't. I think that's right. And what we see constantly in qualitative, and you've seen this, is just a sense that do something.
Yeah.
Right. Show some fight.
Right.
Right. Even if it's symbolic, show some fight. Now, tactically, there is some debate about tactics here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by the way, most average American voters aren't tuned into all the sort of tactical moves that some of them that were happening today in the Senate, right?
Yeah.
All these tactical moves by Dems and Republicans. They just want to know if Democrats are fighting and they're pushing back on Trump and what MAGA's doing. This man is asking the courts to allow him to not feed hungry, poor people in this country.
Right. Yes.
And there is some conversation among some here that goes a little bit like this. Well, all these people, they voted for Republicans in the last election. They should have to. There's an accountability that goes along with that decision to vote Republican.
Yeah. And
Democrats are standing in the way of that accountability.
Yeah.
And while it sounds Machiavellian,
mm-hmm.
right? It is also that old thing that your grandma used to teach you, right? At some point you keep trying to touch that stove. She's going to let you touch that stove so you understand.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a great analogy for the moment that we're in. And it looks like some people are pulling back from that. So, Cornell Belcher, I want to thank you for coming and bringing. There's so much more to talk about. I have to come you back on because there was like 17 different lessons we could take away from Tuesday. We talked about 2. So I'm going to have you come back and help us think through this a little bit more. But I appreciate you joining to talk about what was a pretty good night for Democrats. So thanks for joining. When we come forward, we're going to continue this conversation about the election, but looking at New York and some disinformation and propaganda that was targeted at voters in New York around the mayor's race. Stay with us. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
More of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. Maryland is suing the Trump administration over its decision to keep the FBI headquarters in D.C. Black Attorney General Anthony Brown says Prince George's County fairly won the bid for Greenbelt, and reversing that decision violates federal law and undermines the selection process. Chicago's Black Mayor Brandon Johnson met virtually with the United Nations Human Rights Council Friday morning, accusing the Trump administration of human rights violations tied to immigration raids and food aid cuts. He urged the United Nations to investigate and invited its experts to visit Chicago. And President Trump has granted a pardon to black baseball legend Darryl Strawberry. The former New York Mets star was convicted of federal tax fraud in 1995, receiving 3 years probation and repaying $350,000 in back taxes. The pardon does not cover his past state drug charges. To this day, Strawberry is celebrated as one of baseball's greats. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Tough and Diamond Bar, you got to stall. It's on the 60 eastbound at the 57. Right lane has been blocked. And that 60 eastbound is going to just be a tough drive anyway. We're seeing delays that are pushing back overall. Pretty close to the 5 out of Boyle Heights. You've got a little open drive right around the 605, but nothing to get excited about. Eastbound side of the 210. Pasadena slowing down from almost Lincoln. Delays and stretches all the way all the way to Waterman in San Bernardino. And the 10 eastbound pretty jammed as well out of Boyle Heights from almost the 10 freeway. Delays and stretches into Redlands.
The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has been at the forefront of inflammatory bowel disease research and care for over 50 years. Learn more about research, education, and support at Crohn'sColitisFoundation.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Important game for the USC football team tonight at the Coliseum. The number 19 Trojans are at home against Northwestern at 6-2 overall. The Trojans need a win to remain in contention for the 12-team NCAA playoffs. 3 losses could knock them out of consideration. UCLA is back in action tomorrow night after a bye week. The Bruins take on Nebraska at the Rose Bowl. Interesting game for UCLA interim coach Tim Skipper. Skipper needs to impress the administration to show he can get the team back on track after a major setback in their last game. A 56-6 loss at number 2 Indiana. 6 o'clock kickoff tomorrow night. Fox Sports will have live coverage if you're not going to the game. The top HBCU football game this weekend features Howard at South Carolina State. Howard, known to some folks as the real HU, has not won at South Carolina State since 2017. South Carolina State has won 4 straight. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. Southern California Edison confirmed to show up this week for our Altadena Town Hall, but then they reneged on their promise. KBLA Talk 1580 organized a town hall specifically for Black Altadena residents, people whose homes, memories, and futures went up in smoke when SCE's equipment sparked the flames. This wasn't some ambush or gotcha moment. This was a community saying, we need answers. We need to understand how this so-called fast pay program actually works. We need to know if justice will ever reach us. And Edison said no. Let's be crystal clear about what that means. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was a choice that tells Black Altadena residents that even after the fire, even after the devastation, even after admitting fault through the settlement program, they still don't matter enough for a couple of hours of Edison's time. You know what takes courage? Facing people you've harmed, sitting in a room and yes, live on talk radio with folks who lost everything because of your infrastructure failures and explaining how you intend to make it right. That takes backbone. That's what real accountability looks like. When you're the reason people lost everything, you don't get to cancel on survivors waiting for answers. You don't get to send your regrets to KBLA and call it a day. This is about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. This is the same pattern of neglect that may have led to the fires in the first place, and now they're doubling down on disrespect in the aftermath. The residents of Altadena have endured enough hell, and now they are navigating the nightmare of settlement claims, trying to understand what they are actually entitled to receive. Southern California Edison, you owe Black Altadena more than money. You owe them your presence, your transparency, your time, and you owe KBLA Talk 1580 a public apology, I might add. And until we get it, we're going to keep emailing the top dog at SCE, Mr. Pedro Pizarro. His email is pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Pizarro spelled P-I-Z-A-R-R-O. pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Or you can call 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1. That's 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1 to speak to a live person and express yourself. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley, and as always, we welcome your feedback.
Open enrollment is your opportunity to choose a plan that connects you to Providence's comprehensive healthcare network. Choose a plan that includes Providence and gain access to a dedicated team of highly trained primary care physicians and specialists. from nationally recognized doctors and hospitals, Providence ensures quality care is always within reach. When you choose Providence, you choose after-hours care through our nurse advice line, urgent care, or virtual express care. You choose 24/7 access through the Providence mobile app to message providers, request prescription refills, schedule appointments, check lab results, and more. This open enrollment, prioritize your well-being with the peace of mind that comes from choosing a provider that values excellence and compassionate care. Don't just choose a plan. Choose a plan dedicated to health equity and community engagement. Choose a plan that believes health is a human right. Choose a plan that delivers exceptional care and cares about your community. Choose a plan that offers Providence. Visit chooseprovidence.org to learn more.
You're inside the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the Black Pack. I am your host, Adrianne Shropshire, and we are continuing our conversation about Tuesday's election and the campaign that was covered across the nation, that people were talking about across the country, was the race for mayor of New York. New Yorkers showed up and gave Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani more votes than any mayoral candidate since the 1960s. And the campaign to win over black voters was as intense as the overall campaign itself. But just like in 2016, and in 2020 and in 24, black voters were also targeted with disinformation and propaganda. So joining us now is activist and organizer with the Malcolm X grassroots movement, Lumumba Bandeli. Lumumba, thank you so much for joining us here on the Black Pack.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone.
So obviously lots of excitement all over the country for Tuesday night's big win by Zohran Mamdani. And I was saying earlier in the show that after the primary, after the Democratic primary, there was a whole discussion about how black voters weren't going to support Mamdani, right? You saw, those who were his competitors, right? Both Cuomo and Eric Adams, make a big deal, right? After the Democratic primary, and obviously Mayor Adams wasn't in that primary, but he still was running until he wasn't, and talking about their support from black communities. But it is interesting that in the end, right, Mamdani won more black support than any other candidate, and so I'm just wondering about your thoughts on that before we get into the mail that suddenly mysteriously started appealing on people's doorsteps. Just your thoughts on that, right? On that shift, on the work that was done to inform black voters in New York about this candidate and what he meant, and to sort of undo some of the scare tactics, right, about him and who he was, and particularly because, he's a member of DSA. So talk to us about that work and what actually happened, that shift that happened to bring black voters over.
Well, as an organizer, it's always important to say that none of this was magic, right? This was actual work. And it's really important to just tip your hat to the volunteers that came out for them. I mean, over 100,000 volunteers knocked on, I forget, 700,000 doors. Like, it's unreal, how many people so we talk about volunteers, not paid folks, like people who donated their time. And so in my neighborhood in Bedford-Stuyvesant, there were literally tables in the park that were up for about a week and a half before elections, because we had early voting. So when early voting started, they were camped out, and they always had people around the table. So it was a very strong ground game. And I'm glad it was, because it needed that with everything that was happening, with all the investments that went into Cuomo's campaign, that went into indirectly Cuomo's campaign by doing these smear campaigns against Mamdani. It was an uphill battle. And so the idea that black folks came out in such large numbers was because work was done to bring black folks out. And that is extremely important. So everything from, again, the ground game, people knocking on doors, but also key people, just engaging in conversations and having to dismantle some of the misinformation that has been going on. Like, oh, he wants to legalize prostitution. He wants to do, and these are like really, they're not new talking points. Right. But depending on who you're talking to, it may be new to them. And so it really was a all hands on deck. And so I was not a part of the campaign. But I had to have conversations with my family. I had to have conversations with my neighbors about why I was doing this, And people are used to, and this is a whole other case study that needs to be done. Maybe it's been done already. But the pattern of our communities being stuck in voting a particular way because this is how it's always been done has been so dangerous.
Right.
So dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that for a minute, because I do think that there was some opening up, but I also think people try and take advantage of that too, right? And New York is a very different kind of place, right, in terms of how electoral politics get done, right? I'm in LA. We don't have anything like the machines that work in New York. And I lived and worked in New York for a very long time. It was shocking to me. I was like, wait, what is this? How does this get done? But that's part of the sort of like that keeps that machine sort of orientation is also how, that the sort of habitual, voting in one way, how those machines help to hold that in place and, like calcify.
That's exactly it.
Right. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And so this win really was historic in that it disrupted that machine.
Yes.
Because everything was done according to plan, and he was not supposed to not only win the primary, but he certainly was not supposed to win by that much.
Right.
And so for that to happen, and then to win the general election by that much, the machine in New York City has been, I'm not going to say it's broken, but it's clearly been seen to be fallible. There's cracks in it, and I think people are now seeing that there's other opportunities to be able to engage as opposed to what we're used to. And I think also, to be honest, our current mayor has been digging his own hole.
Yeah, deeper and deeper and deeper.
Digging his own hole, and more people are like, I wish he would just shut up.
I'm in LA, and I was like, stop talking.
But what is important, I think that there's a lot that needs to go into just studying the ascension of Eric Adams, where he came from, where he departed from where he came from, because my father was a part of the National Black United Front, as was Eric Adams.
Right.
So in the 80s, Eric Adams comes out of this very radical organizing base that essentially is about not just Black empowerment in general, but dismantling, and we didn't have this language back then, but dismantling the police state by, preventing police brutality, by doing all of these other things, standing in opposition to South African apartheid, all of that.
Yeah.
Fast forward, and he's on the other side of that, a total 180.
Yeah.
And, and it's the machine that helps to really create that shift.
Yeah.
And that was a huge learning lesson. And so I think for most of us here in the city, a lot of what we know has to happen is, while we're excited now about the win, we have to build a Black electoral base that can sustain the time that we have, not only for this 4 years, but build something that lasts for the next few decades.
Yeah,
it's an absolute must.
Yeah, I mean that's a really important point, because I think that folks get caught up in the excitement and not only the sort of like the need to build a Black electoral base, but there's also some accountability that will have to happen along the way in terms of making sure folks didn't just show up for no reason, right? There's actual need. So I appreciate you bringing that. I do want to get into, when we come forward, I want to get into the fact that Black folks also had to fight. They had to push back and fight against people who are actively trying to misinform them. And that's also, I think, one of the when we think about how great the effort was, even that piece was amazing, where people were, and I'm saying when we come forward we're going to talk about this, and now I'm talking about it. So let me stop, so we can sort of get into what happened on the other side. So we are going to continue this conversation with Lumumba Bandele when we come forward. This is KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to The Black Pack.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
They say the hardest part of getting something done is getting started. Well, we did that 30 years ago when California first took on the tobacco industry. Now, Smoking is down 60%, lung cancer 52%. A couple of our cities have already ended tobacco sales. A California without big tobacco isn't just possible, it's already happening. See our progress at undo.org.
Ready to order?
Yes. We're earning unlimited 3% cash back on dining and entertainment with the Capital One Saver Card, so let's just get one of everything.
Everything?
Fire everything. The Capital One Saver Card is at table 27, and they're earning unlimited 3% cash back.
Yes, Chef! This is so nice.
Had a feeling you'd want 3% cash back on dessert.
Ooh, tiramisu.
Earn unlimited 3% cash back on dining and entertainment with the Capital One Saver Card. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Los Angeles Regional Food Bank is on a mission to fight hunger and provide nutritious food to those in need across our community. They partner with federal, state, and local programs advocating for better policies and funding for critical hunger relief programs like Cal Fresh, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and the Child and Adult Care Food Program. The food bank works with coalitions and local representatives to make sure hunger is addressed in every district of LA County. They also run nutrition education campaigns, raise hunger awareness, and source nutritious food for distribution, all while supporting regulations that allow food pantries to operate safely. Want to help? Visit lafoodbank.org or call 323-234-3030 to volunteer or find a food bank near you. Together, we can ensure that no one goes hungry in Los Angeles County. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
We are continuing our conversation with Lumumba Bandeli, organizer and activist out of New York with the Malcolm X grassroots movement. So Lumumba, I want to get into this conversation about literally days before Election Day. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I feel like it was days before Election Day when I first started hearing about these mailers, pieces of mail that started landing in people's mailboxes. And I heard about it from you. I saw your post that was like, what is this mail? And it came from an organization called the National Black Empowerment Action Fund. And it seemed to come right around the time where, it seemed to be a little bit maybe of a foregone conclusion that the black vote had shifted. Right. And when, polls were coming in saying that black support for Mamdani was increasing. Right. And then this mail started showing up. And so I saw your post. I got text messages from people asking me, hey, have you ever heard of this group? What is this? This mail is bad. What is this? But talk to us a little bit about what happened and this mail that suddenly seemed to come out of nowhere from a black organization that no one seemed to know anything about.
Yeah, this was odd because it came to my home, came to me, addressed to me, and, at first glance, I thought it was actually a mailer from the Mamdani campaign, targeted to black communities. And then I read it, and it's an all-out attack on DSA, and it does not mention Mamdani by name, but it says DSA needs to not think we're fools, and again, all of the really right-wing talking points that you hear on Fox, that you hear, in fact, on some of the more mainstream things, but it's the right-wing messaging, and they are targeting black folks, and it's saying it's coming from a Black organization, a Black civic engagement organization.
Right.
So immediately I just grab my phone and do a quick Google search.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look up this organization, and what's I guess more enraging for me is that they didn't do anything to try to hide this.
Right.
That these are folks who are essentially, I call them Apex Blacks.
Mm-hmm.
They are essentially functioning in service of AIPAC, because in their bio they state that they have leadership roles
mm-hmm.
in AIPAC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they have this organization, both a C3 and a C4,
right.
that has a presence in Detroit, New York City, Atlanta, Memphis, St. Louis, Minneapolis. And
what do those places have in common? What do those places have in common?
Think about what's happening in those cities, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at that, I posted that, and then just like a domino effect, I begin to hear that it's more than just mailers. I got later, maybe a day later, a text message,
mm-hmm.
but people began to tell me that they were hearing radio ads on our local Black stations,
mm-hmm.
the same organization.
Right.
So we did some digging and found out that they actually ended up spending somewhere around $2 million for this targeted campaign.
That's not small.
That's not small.
No.
At all. And so fortunately, we were able to get the word out. WFP was able to do something about them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The social media network did its thing really quickly.
Right, yeah.
Young Turks ended up posting about them, a few other people. And so eventually we began to see what was happening. But the idea that they were grabbing this messaging, again, that comes from the far right folks.
Right.
And part of the challenge, though, is that we as Black folks, particularly in New York City in this particular instance, have a short memory, because Mamdani will not be the first DSA mayor of New York City.
Right.
And so when people hear that this is DSA DSA members about to become mayor, I'm like, God, the world is going to change. It's like the most unradical mayor you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
The only most radical thing about him was his skin color. Mayor David Dinkins was a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists.
Say that again, because I want people to hear what you just said. Say it again.
The first Black mayor of New York City, right? Mayor David Dinkins was a card-carrying member of DSA when he was elected.
Right.
Not like previously in his radical youth days. No.
Right.
When he ran and won the mayoral seat.
Right.
So this is not anything new.
Right.
And so the idea that they're trying to do this McCarthyism kind of Red Scare around DSA, just is old tactics again.
Yeah.
But this particular thing coming from a Black organization targeting specifically Black communities was something I'm glad we jumped on, and I'm glad we were able to get folks to hear out.
Right, and that people sort of mobilized around it. I think like the social media took over, but I also think that it is an indicator that Black folks know and understand from the last several elections when we've been targeted with so much disinformation and propaganda from the right, right? That people are questioning what they're seeing, and that was the thing for me. So when I saw yours and I started to get text messages from people, I thought, people are not just taking this at face value. They got their mailers, they got their text messages, right? And they said, what is this? Right? Is this propaganda? And I think that this is a really good sign going forward, because we know that we're just going to be layered and inundated with propaganda as a Black community as we go forward, where people try and confuse us. Even that point that you just made is so important about David Dinkins was a member of DSA, right? And surely, right, people, if reminded, right, will remember this, and how New York City didn't fall into the sea because David Dinkins was mayor, right? And so I just feels to me, and I would like your opinion on this too, is that did it feel like people reacted in that way? That people were like, hey, I'm being targeted with misinformation?
No, and that's what's interesting. I think our movement folks who are plugged into our national work or local work, I think yes. They got it. But with people who are not plugged into that, they read my post and other posts and saying, well, I'm glad you told me that, because I would not have thought anything was wrong with this.
Right.
I thought it would have been a regular Black organization. Because if you read their bios, One of them is in leadership on the board of the Rochester NAACP. The other one is like I think FAMU alum. So they have all of these things that look like they us. Right. And so for our movement folks, yes, it was that. But for folks who are not plugged into our work like that, they did not know. Yeah. And that's why us getting the word out was very important.
Yeah, just huge because it also should be an indicator, and I think it'd be great if you talked about case study earlier. It would be great if you all just did a case study, right? That could be moved out, because I do think that people are going to hear from folks. Right. Certainly going into next year's midterms, people are going to hear from folks. And it is so important. And this is not to say if you hear from an organization you've never heard from before, you should ignore them. Right. Because there's lots of great organizations that come into existence all the time. But it does mean we have to be more thoughtful, right, about what we're seeing, right, and doing the thing that you did. You just Googled, who are these people, right? Because everybody doesn't have all skin folk and kin folk, and everybody doesn't have our best interests at heart. You should think about the trusted messengers that are out there, right, during campaign season or during any time when we know that our community's interests are on the line. We really do need to be thinking about, who do we know? Do we trust the messengers, right? It feels really important in this moment where there is an attempt to cause us all to live in a reality that is not real.
And the flip of that also means that we have to do a better job of building organic indigenous bases of people that know us. Right. You know what I mean? So that when something like that comes, they can say, "Oh, but what is this?" Malcolm X grassroots movement, what is this? Right. Adrian, what is this? But as long as we have this distance between our communities, and again, I'm not talking about folks that we work with. Right. I'm talking about our neighbors. I'm talking about folks that we in the salons with, that we in bars with, we in the barbershops with, right? Regular folk, right? Unless we, do something to close that gap, they are going to find ways to continue to leverage this wedge. They're going to find ways to continue to create new faces of this far right kind of messaging. Yeah. But we have a mandate. We absolutely have to do the work of building, and not simply for the sake of having an electoral base.
That's right.
But because we need to be clear that voting is a tool.
Right. That's right.
Right. And so for all of the work that we have to do, we have to genuinely know and show that this is actually done in service of our community. Yep. And that we're utilizing electoral power as a tool to advance whatever our priorities are.
To get us where we need to go.
To get us where we need to go.
Yeah. Well,
and then I'm hoping. Sorry, go ahead. No.
I'm gonna wrap us. I'm getting a little signal here from Andy that it's time to wrap up. But I appreciate you, right, for actually getting the word out. That was so important. And again, I saw that. You're the first person I heard it from. So I just appreciate for all the work that you all are doing, and appreciate you coming on and talking to us about the great victory there, and how people really fought back to make sure that the people who needed the right information got the right information. So I want to thank you all for joining us too here at the Black Pack. We'll be back next Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. as you know, and I hope you'll take a moment to join KBLA and St. Jude Children's Hospital in fighting childhood cancer and sickle cell. Join us again. $19 a month pledge. 1-800-411-9898 will get you this great T-shirt that says this shirt saves lives. Hope you all are able to find all kinds of things that you can do this weekend to have a great weekend.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. Republicans are rejecting Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's plan to end the government shutdown. Schumer says Democrats will back the GOP's House bill if it includes a one-year Obamacare credit extension, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune called it a non-starter.
Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown.
It's unclear if the Senate will vote on the bill today. Maryland's Black Congressman Kwesi